They say a blind vampire lord is easy prey. They are wrong. 3 o'clock in the morning. The kitchen of Ravencrest Manor. Water scalding hot, turning Miriam Castellane's hands the color of raw meat. 200 plates, 200 crystal goblets, 200 pieces of silver cutlery that hadn't been used in 8 months, but had to shine like mirrors because the head housekeeper demanded perfection even when no one was watching. Except someone was always watching. Mira didn't know that yet. She scrubbed until her knuckles cracked and bled into the suds. She was 38 years old. Too old to be starting over as a housemaid. Too proud to be grateful for the chance. Too desperate to walk away. Her brother Nathaniel needed $75,000, or the Nightshade Syndicate would kill him. Slowly. Creatively. The kind of death that sends a message to every other veteran drowning in medical debt and bad decisions. The manor paid triple the standard rate. The agency had been very clear about that. They had also been very clear about why. No one stays at Ravencrest Manor. The last 3 maids had vanished without notice. Before them, a cook who lasted 6 days. Before him, a groundskeeper who left screaming about shadows that moved when Lord Ravencrest walked past. But Mira had survived 12 years as an army medic in places where death wore a uniform and carried an AK-47. She could handle one eccentric vampire with a degenerative eye condition. Or so she told herself, as she dried the last plate and set it on the rack with hands that trembled from exhaustion. You work with the dedication of someone who has no choice. The voice came from the doorway, low, precise, the kind of voice that had ordered men into battle and expected to be obeyed without question. Mira spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lord Lysander Ravencrest stood in the entrance to the kitchen, one pale hand resting on an ornate walking stick, the other extended slightly, as if feeling for obstacles that weren't there. His eyes were wrapped in layers of white gauze that looked freshly applied, professionally done, the kind of bandaging that said this wasn't temporary. He was tall, broader in the shoulders than she'd expected for someone supposedly frail. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray, with a subtle pinstripe that probably cost more than Mira made in a year. His dark hair was swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so pale, so still, so utterly devoid of the small movements that make people seem alive. "My lord?" Mira dried her hands quickly on her apron, cursing herself for the red rawness that made her look incompetent. "I didn't hear you come in. I apologize for the noise." "The noise?" Lysander tilted his head, the bandages hiding whatever expression his eyes might have held. "You were silent as death itself, Miss Castelaine. I heard your heartbeat change when the water grew too hot. I heard the rhythm of the plates as you stacked them. But I heard no complaint, no curse, no tears." He took a step forward, then another, moving with the cautious grace of someone who had memorized every inch of his own home and still didn't trust his memory. "That interests me," he continued. "The previous staff cursed constantly. The cook before her wept into the soup. You bleed into the dishwater and say nothing at all." Mira's throat went dry. She glanced at the sink where thin ribbons of red still swirled in the cooling water. He couldn't see that. He was blind. The agency had shown her the medical reports. Rare magical necrosis of the optic nerves. Irreversible. Progressive. Within 6 months, he would be completely helpless. And yet he stood there, describing things he shouldn't be able to know. "I was taught not to complain," Mira said carefully. "Complaining doesn't change the situation. It only wastes energy." "Military training?" "Yes, my lord. 12 years. Field medic. Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany. Lysander smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve at the corner of his mouth, but it transformed his face from marble sculpture to something almost human. "Your grandfather was military as well," he said. It wasn't a question. Mira blinked. "How did you—" "I read your file before you arrived. Castellane. Thomas Castellane. Served in the 101st Airborne. Normandy, June 6, 1944. Lysander's voice dropped half an octave. "I was there that day. I saved 37 men from a German machine gun nest. Your grandfather was number 12. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. Mira grabbed the edge of the counter. "You knew my grandfather?" "I carried him 2 miles with a bullet in his leg and 3 in my own back." Lysander turned toward her, with uncanny precision, as if he could see the shock written across her face. "He was a good man, brave, loyal. He never told you about that day, did he?" He said a British officer saved his unit. He never said the officer was vampire." Lysander finished the word for her. "No, he wouldn't have. We had an understanding, your grandfather and I. I saved his life. He kept my secret. And now, his granddaughter stands in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, bleeding into my dishwater, because her brother owes money to ghouls who pretend to be human." Mira's breath caught. "How do you know about Nate?" "The same way I know you haven't slept in 48 hours. The same way I know you're wearing a cross under your uniform that belonged to your mother. The same way I know you're terrified of me, but too proud to show it." Lysander took another step closer. "I know because I pay attention, Miss Castellane. And in this house, attention is the difference between living and vanishing." He held out his hand, not for her to shake, for her to take and be guided, an old-fashioned gesture that belonged to a different century. "Come," he said, "we'll discuss the terms of your employment somewhere more comfortable than a kitchen that smells of blood and bleach." Mira stared at the offered hand. This was the moment, the choice. Take it and enter a world that had already swallowed 3 women before her. Or walk away. Go back to the city. Watch Nate die because she was too afraid to work for a blind vampire who somehow knew things no blind man should know. She took his hand. His skin was cold. Not corpse cold, just the temperature of marble that's been sitting in shadow. But his grip was gentle, careful. The touch of someone who knew exactly how much pressure a human hand could withstand, and stayed well below that threshold. He led her through corridors lit by gas lamps that cast more shadow than light. The manor was enormous, Gothic, the kind of place that appeared in nightmares and murder mysteries. Vaulted ceilings, portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow movement. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. And everywhere, the smell of old money and older secrets. They climbed a curved staircase to the 2nd floor. Lysander navigated without hesitation, his walking stick tapping out a rhythm that echoed off stone walls. Never a misstep, never a pause. Mira watched the way he moved, fluid, controlled, like a dancer who'd memorized the choreography so thoroughly that it looked effortless. Her medical training kicked in automatically. She'd treated enough blast victims to recognize the signs of blindness, the slight tilt of the head to favor hearing, the tendency to reach out before stepping, the micro-adjustments when navigating familiar space. Lysander displayed none of it. He moved like a man who could see perfectly. But that was impossible. She'd seen the reports. The agency wouldn't lie about something that fundamental. Would they? They reached a library that made Mira's breath catch, despite herself. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves packed with leather-bound volumes. a fireplace large enough to roast an ox, Persian rugs that probably cost more than her childhood home, and windows, massive bay windows that should have let in moonlight, but were covered by heavy velvet curtains drawn so tight that not a single beam could penetrate. Lysander released her hand and moved to a high-backed leather chair positioned near the fire. He sat with the careful precision of someone who'd sat in that exact spot 10,000 times. "Please," he gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit." Mira sat. The leather was butter-soft and still warm, as if someone had been sitting there recently. Lysander steepled his fingers beneath his chin. The bandages across his eyes made it impossible to read his expression, but his posture radiated focus, intensity, the kind of attention that made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit. "I require total honesty," he said. "So I'll begin with my own. This house is dying, Miss Castellane. Not the building. The building will stand another 1,000 years, but the household, the staff, the structure that keeps a vampire lord's territory running. It's rotting from the inside." He paused. The fire crackled in the silence. "I have been blind for 8 months, Lysander continued. In that time, I've lost $2 million from my accounts. Blood wine, worth $50,000, has vanished from my cellars. Contracts have been forged in my name. Debts have been fabricated. And every single person who works under this roof believes I'm too helpless to notice." Mira's pulse quickened. "Then why haven't you fired them?" "Because I want to know who is orchestrating it." Lysander's voice dropped to something almost dangerous. "A butler doesn't embezzle millions without backing. Someone powerful wants me removed. Someone who believes a blind vampire is easy prey. I intend to find out who, and then I intend to make an example that will echo through the vampire world for the next century." He leaned forward slightly. "That's where you come in, Miss Castellana. I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't part of the existing corruption, someone who has a reason to be loyal that doesn't involve money or fear." "My brother," Mira said quietly. "Your brother?" Lysander nodded. "Nathaniel Castellana, 32 years old, disabled veteran, Purple Heart, lost his left leg below the knee in Fallujah, developed an opioid addiction during recovery, got clean, relapsed, got clean again, and then made the mistake of borrowing money from creatures who consider a $75,000 debt the perfect lever to control a desperate man." He tilted his head. "The Nightshade Syndicate specializes in leverage, Miss Castellani. They find good people in bad situations, and they offer solutions that always make things worse. Your brother's debt is real. The threat to his life is real. But the timeline isn't." "What do you mean?" "They've given him 6 months to pay, but they'll kill him in 3 if he shows any sign of actually raising the money. They don't want repayment. They want long-term control. A disabled veteran makes an excellent mule for moving contraband across state lines. Police don't search wheelchairs as thoroughly as they should." Mira's hands clenched into fists. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been fighting the Nightshade Syndicate for 20 years. They're ghouls. Parasites. They feed on desperation the way I feed on blood. And they've been trying to infiltrate my territory since 2003. Lysander's smile was cold enough to frost glass. "They think I'm vulnerable now. They're wrong. But I'm willing to let them believe it a little longer." He stood, walked to the fireplace, extended his hands toward warmth he probably couldn't feel. "Here's what I'm offering, Miss Castellane. You work for me. Openly. Visibly. You attend to my needs as a personal maid. You bathe me. You dress me. You read to me. You perform all the duties that reinforce the image of a helpless invalid who needs constant care. And secretly? Secretly, you watch, you listen, you document. You help me identify every single person in this house who has betrayed me. And when the time comes, his voice went soft, lethal. You stand aside while I handle them in the old way. Mira swallowed hard. And in exchange? In exchange, your brother's debt vanishes. $75,000, paid in full, delivered to the Nightshade Syndicate with the kind of message that makes them forget Nathaniel Castellane ever existed. Lysander turned back toward her. You save his life. I clean my house. Everyone wins, except the people who deserve to lose. It was too good to be true. Mira knew that. She'd been in enough combat zones to recognize when someone was offering salvation with strings attached. What's the catch? She asked. The catch is that you might die. Lysander said it with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. If my enemies discover what you're doing, they will kill you, quietly, efficiently, and I may not be able to stop them in time. This isn't a game, Miss Castellane. This is war. Quiet war. Civil war. But war nonetheless. He moved back to his chair, sat, fixed his bandaged gaze on her with unnerving accuracy. So I need to know, are you brave, or are you just desperate? Mira thought about Nate, about the phone call 3 weeks ago when he'd sobbed into the receiver about men with yellow eyes who'd shown him pictures of what they did to people who didn't pay, about little Rosie, Nate's 8-year-old daughter, who still drew pictures of her daddy with 2 legs because she couldn't process the reality. She thought about her grandfather, Thomas Castellane, who'd carried a piece of shrapnel in his hip for 60 years and never complained, who'd told her once, when she was considering enlisting, that courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. I'm desperate, Mira said, but I'm also too stubborn to quit. So I guess you'll find out which one matters more. Lysander's smile was genuine this time, warm, almost human. Then welcome to Ravencrest Manor, Miss Castellane. Try not to die in the first week. I've grown weary of breaking in new staff. The first 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as domestic service. Mira quickly learned that the household staff of Ravencrest Manor operated on 2 levels. The surface level, where everyone performed their duties with mechanical efficiency, and the underneath level, where theft, abuse, and casual cruelty thrived like mold in a flooded basement. The head butler was a man named Gideon Ashworth, 63 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, the kind of servant who looked more aristocratic than the aristocrat he served. He'd worked at Ravencrest Manor for 120 years, longer than most vampires lived, long enough to consider himself untouchable. He was also, Mira discovered within the first 48 hours, a thief, a liar, and a sadist who took genuine pleasure in making the younger staff miserable. The head housekeeper was a woman named Octavia Marsh, 55, rail-thin, face like a hatchet. She ran the cleaning staff with the efficiency of a drill sergeant and the compassion of a guillotine. Mira watched her reduce a 20-year-old scullery maid to tears over a water spot on a goblet. The girl scrubbed until her fingers bled. Octavia poured the wine out anyway and made her start over. These were the people Lord Ravencrest trusted to run his household. Or rather, these were the people he allowed to believe they ran his household, while he watched them from behind bandages and waited for them to reveal themselves completely. Mira's duties began at dawn. She woke at 5, bathed, dressed in the severe gray uniform that marked her as Lord Ravencrest's personal attendant, pinned her dark hair back in a bun that would have made her old drill instructor proud. By 5:30, she was in the kitchen preparing Lord Ravencrest's breakfast. That's where she learned the first truth about Ravencrest Manor. The staff was trying to kill him. Not quickly, not obviously, but systematically, methodically. Death by 1,000 small poisonings. The blood served to Lysander wasn't human blood drawn from ethical donors as required by the treaty between vampire and human governments. It was pig's blood, purchased from a slaughterhouse, stored improperly, half congealed. The kind of swill that would make a ghoul vomit. For a vampire of Lysander's age and lineage, it was like trying to survive on sawdust and rainwater. Technically possible, eventually fatal. Mira discovered this on her third morning when she opened the refrigeration unit in the butler's pantry and found 2 rows of labeled blood bags. The front row, marked Lord Ravencrest Daily Supply, was brown and thick. The back row, marked Premium Reserve, was bright red and properly sealed. She took a bag from each row, held them up to the light. The difference was unmistakable. "What are you doing?" Mira spun. Octavia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrow with suspicion. "Preparing Lord Ravencrest's breakfast," Mira said calmly. She held up the brown bag. "Is this what you've been serving him?" "That's the blood provided by the clinic. I don't question the quality. I simply serve what we're given." "This isn't from a clinic." Mira kept her voice level. Professional. The way she'd spoken to superior officers who were wrong, but outranked her. "This is pig's blood. Probably 3 weeks old. Definitely contaminated." Octavia's lips thinned. "You've been here 3 days, girl. You don't get to question how things are done." "I'm not questioning how things are done. I'm questioning whether you're trying to starve Lord Ravencrest to death or just make him suffer." Mira set down the brown bag, picked up one from the Premium Reserve. "This is human blood, O negative, properly stored. Why isn't he getting this? Those reserves are for emergencies. He's the lord of this territory. Every meal should be an emergency-level priority." They stared at each other across the pantry. 2 women, 2 very different ideas about loyalty. Finally, Octavia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Serve him whatever you like," she said. "But when Gideon finds out you've been raiding the reserve supply, don't come crying to me about consequences." She turned and left. The sound of her heels on marble echoed like gunshots. Mira stood alone in the pantry, holding a bag of blood that might cost her this job, and thought about her grandfather pulling trigger on D-Day, knowing full well he might die in the next 5 seconds. Sometimes courage was just doing your job correctly, while everyone around you did it wrong. She took the premium blood upstairs. Lord Ravencrest's private chambers occupied the entire east wing of the 3rd floor. Mira had never seen anything like it. The bedroom alone was larger than her childhood home. The bed was a 4-poster monstrosity that looked like it belonged to a medieval king. The walls were covered in tapestries depicting battle scenes from wars she'd only read about in history books. And everywhere the smell of old leather and older secrets. Lysander sat in a chair by the window. The curtains were drawn, as always, but he faced them anyway, as if he could see through velvet and stone to the sunrise beyond. He was dressed in a silk robe the color of deep wine. His feet were bare. His hair was slightly mussed. He looked, for the first time since Mira had met him, almost vulnerable. "Good morning, Miss Castellane," he said without turning. "You're 3 minutes early, and you're carrying blood that wasn't meant for me." Mira stopped. "How did you—" "Premium Reserve has a different scent. Cleaner. sweeter, human rather than animal. He turned his head toward her. You raided Gideon's private stock. It's not his private stock. It's your blood, purchased with your money, for your consumption. Mira set the tray down on the side table with perhaps more force than necessary. They've been serving you pig's blood for months. Did you know? Lysander's smile was faint, sad. Of course I knew. Then why didn't you stop them? Because I needed to see how far they would go. He stood, moved toward her with that uncanny grace that made her medical training scream warnings her rational mind refused to hear. A starving lord is a vulnerable lord, Miss Castellane. Vulnerable lords make mistakes, and mistakes create opportunities for those who've been waiting patiently to strike. He stopped close enough that Mira could feel the cold radiating from his skin. Gideon has been embezzling for 15 years. But embezzlement is a crime of opportunity, not passion. Someone is directing him. Someone who wants me weakened, but not dead. Not yet. They want me alive long enough to sign documents, transfer assets, legitimize their claim to my territory. Who? That, Lysander said softly, is what I hired you to help me discover. He reached out, found the tray without looking, picked up the crystal goblet filled with proper blood, and brought it to his lips. He drank slowly, carefully, like a man savoring the first real meal after months of starvation. When he finished, he set the goblet down and turned toward Mira with an expression she couldn't read. "Thank you," he said. "That was the first honest meal I've had in 8 months." Something in Mira's chest twisted. This man, this creature, was 680 years old. He'd survived wars and plagues and centuries of threats that would have destroyed lesser beings. And someone in his own household was trying to kill him with bad blood and forged documents. "It won't happen again," Mira said. "I'll make sure of it." "I know you will," Lysander smiled. "That's why you're still alive when the others aren't." The confrontation happened at dinner on the 5th night. Mira had settled into a routine. Wake at 5, prepare proper blood for Lysander, attend to his bathing and dressing, read to him from books he'd probably memorized decades ago, but still seemed to enjoy. Document every instance of theft, cruelty, or incompetence she witnessed in the household. The list was growing longer by the day, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated how much the staff hated anyone who disrupted their comfortable corruption. Dinner was served in the main dining hall at precisely 7 o'clock, an absurd display of formality for a man eating alone. The table could seat 40. Lysander sat at the head, isolated in a pool of candlelight. Mira stood nearby, ready to assist if needed. Octavia personally served the meal. She placed a silver chalice in front of Lysander with exaggerated care. Mira glanced at it. Her medical training kicked in immediately. The blood was wrong. Not pig's blood this time. Something else. Darker, thicker, with an oily sheen that caught the candlelight. "What is that?" Mira asked. Octavia's smile was poisonous. "Lord Ravencrest's dinner, as ordered." "That's not blood." "Of course it's blood." "Oh, negative. From the reserve stock you're so fond of raiding." Lysander sat motionless, his bandaged face turned toward the chalice as if he could see the wrongness of it. Mira stepped forward, reached for the chalice. Octavia's hand shot out and gripped her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. "You overstep, girl. The Lord's meals are my responsibility, not yours. Your responsibility is to serve him properly. This isn't proper." "And what would you know about serving a vampire lord?" You've been here 5 days." They were drawing attention now. Other staff members had gathered in the doorway, watching, waiting to see if the new girl would back down or push back. Mira met Octavia's gaze and didn't blink. "I know enough to recognize when someone's trying to poison my employer." The room went silent. Octavia's face flushed dark red. "How dare you?" "Enough!" Lysander's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He didn't raise his volume. Didn't need to. 600 years of absolute authority rang in that single word. Both women froze. Lysander reached out, found the chalice with unsettling accuracy, brought it to his nose, and inhaled deeply. "Miss Castellane is correct," he said quietly. "This is tainted blood, deliberately contaminated with something acidic. Silver dust, perhaps, or mercury, designed to cause pain without immediate death." He set the chalice down. "Octavia, you will remove this. You will bring me a fresh serving from the reserve stock, and you will do so without complaint or comment. Is that understood?" Octavia's hands trembled with barely suppressed rage. "Yes, my lord." "And Octavia?" "Yes, my lord." "If I ever find you serving me poisoned blood again, I will have you removed from this household. Permanently, with prejudice. Do you understand what that means?" The color drained from Octavia's face. "Yes, my lord." She grabbed the chalice and fled. The gathered staff scattered like roaches when the light comes on. Mira stood alone with Lysander in the cavernous dining hall, her heart hammering, her wrist aching where Octavia had grabbed her. "You made an enemy today," Lysander said calmly. "I know." "She will retaliate, quietly, cruelly. The staff will make your life unbearable." "I know that too." Lysander tilted his head. "Then why did you do it?" Mira thought about that, about all the times in the army when she'd had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. About the line between duty and conscience. "Because you saved my grandfather's life 76 years ago," she said finally. "And because someone needs to save yours now." For a long moment, Lysander said nothing. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Keep me company while we wait for Octavia to return with something that won't kill me." "That's not appropriate, my lord. I'm staff. You're the only person in this house who's tried to keep me alive in the last 8 months. I think we can dispense with some of the formality." Mira hesitated, then pulled out the chair and sat. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence was oddly comfortable, like two soldiers on watch, each knowing the other had their back. When Octavia returned with a fresh chalice, her movements were stiff with suppressed fury. She set it down without meeting anyone's eyes and left without being dismissed. Lysander drank, slowly, savoring it. "Tell me about the sunset, Miss Castellane," he said when he finished. Mira glanced at the curtained windows. "I can't see it from here, my lord." "Then describe it from memory. What does a sunset look like to someone who still has eyes that work?" So Mira described it. The way the sky turned colors that shouldn't exist. The way clouds caught fire. The way shadows grew long, and the world held its breath in that moment between day and night. Lysander listened with his entire being, head tilted, bandaged face turned toward her, absorbing every word like a man dying of thirst. When she finished, he reached out, found her hand on the table, covered it with his own cold fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. That was beautiful. Mira looked down at their hands, his pale and cold, hers warm and calloused. They shouldn't fit together, but somehow they did. The letter arrived on the 7th night. Mira found it slipped under her door when she returned to her quarters after helping Lysander prepare for sleep. A plain envelope, no return address, her name written in precise block letters. She knew what it was before she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed Nate, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. His face was bruised. His prosthetic leg had been removed and lay on the floor beside him, like a broken promise. The letter was brief. Unlock the servant entrance, Saturday midnight. Debt forgiven. Refuse, and your brother dies screaming. You have 3 days to decide. Mira's hands shook. She read it 3 times, then 4, then lost count. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to choose between her brother's life and the man who'd saved her grandfather. 3 days to decide who lived and who died. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the servants' quarters and stared at the letter until the words blurred together. Somewhere in the manor, Lord Lysander Ravencrest sat in his chambers, bandages wrapped tight around eyes that saw everything, waiting to see what his newest maid would do when the moment of truth arrived. And in the shadows, Gideon Ashworth smiled, because the trap was set, and the game was about to begin. 3 days, 72 hours until Saturday midnight. Mira had survived firefights in Fallujah, where the difference between living and dying was measured in heartbeats. She'd held pressure on severed arteries while mortars screamed overhead. She'd made life-or-death decisions in seconds and lived with the consequences for years. But she'd never faced a choice like this. Betray a blind vampire who'd saved her grandfather's life, or watch her brother die screaming. She kept the letter hidden in the lining of her uniform, against her skin, a constant reminder of the clock counting down to impossible decisions. Monday morning came too fast. Mira stood in Lord Ravencrest's bathroom, preparing his bath with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 100 times instead of 7. The water had to be precisely 98 degrees, not hot, not cold. Body temperature. Because vampires didn't generate their own heat, and the shock of temperature change was painful in ways humans couldn't understand. She added mineral salts, a specific blend that Lysander claimed helped with the chronic pain from wounds that never fully healed. Battle wounds. Wars that ended decades before Mira was born. "You're distracted this morning." Mira startled. Lysander stood in the doorway, wearing a robe that had probably cost more than her car. His bandaged face was turned toward her with that unnerving accuracy that made her skin prickle. "I apologize, my lord. The bath is ready." "That's not what I asked." He moved into the room, one hand trailing along the marble counter, finding his way like a man who'd walked this path 10,000 times. "You've been distracted since last night. Your heartbeat is elevated, your breathing is shallow, and you haven't met my eyes once since I entered the room." "You're blindfolded, my lord. There are no eyes to meet." "True." Lysander's smile was faint. "But you don't know that with certainty, do you?" Mira said nothing, kept her hands busy arranging towels that didn't need arranging. Lysander shrugged off his robe. Beneath it, he wore nothing. 680 years had sculpted a body that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marble pale, perfectly proportioned, covered in scars that mapped out centuries of violence. Mira had bathed him 3 times now. It should have been routine, clinical. the way she'd bathed wounded soldiers who couldn't manage alone. But Lysander wasn't wounded, and there was nothing clinical about the way her pulse jumped when he stepped into the bath and sank down with a sigh that sounded almost human. "Tell me what's troubling you," he said quietly. "Nothing, my lord." "Mira." He used her first name deliberately, a breach of formality that felt more intimate than his nakedness. "I've lived long enough to know when someone is lying. You can tell me the truth, or you can keep your secrets, but don't insult both of us by pretending everything is fine." Mira picked up the soap. Expensive. French. The kind that smelled like sandalwood and rain. She worked it into a lather and began washing his shoulders with careful, professional touches. "If you had to choose," she said slowly, "between protecting someone you'd just met and saving someone you loved, which would you choose?" Lysander was quiet for a long moment. Steam rose from the water, fogged the mirrors, made the bathroom feel like its own small world separated from reality. "That depends," he said finally. "Is the person you just met honorable?" "Yes." "And the person you love?" "Also honorable, just desperate. And desperate people make bad choices." "Then you're not choosing between two people." Lysander tilted his head back against the rim of the tub, exposed his throat in a gesture that spoke of either trust or testing. "You're choosing between two versions of honor. The honor of keeping your word to someone new, or the honor of protecting your blood." "That's not an answer." "No." His smile was sad. "Because there isn't one, not a good one. Every choice like that creates a wound that never fully heals. You simply have to decide which scar you can live with." Mira's hands stilled on his shoulders. She thought about Nate, about the way he used to swing Rosie around until she shrieked with laughter, about the night he came home from Walter Reed with one leg and eyes that had seen too much, about the promise their mother had extracted on her deathbed: "Take care of each other." "I made a promise once," Mira whispered, "to my mother before she died. I promised I'd protect my brother no matter what. And you've kept that promise." Lysander reached up, found her wrist with unerring accuracy. His cold fingers wrapped around her pulse point. "But Mira, if your brother asked you to betray an innocent man to save his life, would he ever forgive you? Would he want to live knowing you compromised your honor for his sake?" The question hit like a punch to the sternum. Nate wouldn't. She knew that with bone-deep certainty. Her brother had tried to re-enlist 3 times after losing his leg, kept getting rejected, kept trying anyway because the idea of taking without giving back was anathema to everything they'd been raised to believe. He'd rather die than watch her become something she wasn't. "I don't know what to do," Mira admitted. The words felt like failure. Lysander's grip on her wrist tightened, just slightly, just enough to be reassuring rather than restraining. "Then don't decide yet. You still have time. And Mira?" He turned his bandaged face toward her. "Whatever you choose, I won't judge you for it. Survival is its own form of honor, even when it requires us to do things that haunt us forever." He released her wrist, sank deeper into the water, ended the conversation with the finality of a door closing. But Mira stood there for another moment, watching steam rise from water that held a man who'd survived 600 years of impossible choices. And she wondered how many of those choices still woke him up at night. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected complication. Mira was in the library, reading aloud from a first edition of Hemingway that probably belonged in a vault. Lysander sat in his usual chair, head tilted in an attitude of listening that might have been genuine or might have been theater. The door burst open. Barrett, the captain of the Shadow Guard, stood in the entrance. 200 years old, built like a brick wall, face expressionless except for the tension around his eyes. "My lord, we have a situation." Lysander's posture changed instantly. The relaxed listener vanished. The warrior emerged, spine straight, shoulders back, head turned toward Barrett with laser focus. "Speak." A child at the gate, female, approximately 8 years old, fevered, asking for Miriam Castellane by name. Mira's heart stopped. Rosie. She was moving before conscious thought caught up. Out of the chair, past Barrett, down the stairs, 3 at a time, through corridors that blurred into a nightmare of stone and shadow. The main gate was wrought iron, 15 feet tall, designed to keep threats out and secrets in. Rosie stood on the other side, so small, so fragile. Her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her skin flushed with fever. She wore a too-thin jacket over pajamas decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. "Aunt Mira," her voice cracked. "The men said Daddy's going to be okay if you do what they want. They said I had to come here and wait. They said—" Mira's hands were on the gate. "Barrett, open it. Now." "Miss Castellane, I can't admit unauthorized. She's 8 years old and burning up with fever. Open the gate." A new voice cut through the standoff, cold, precise, absolutely authoritative. "Open it." Lysander had followed. Moving through the manor with the speed of someone who wasn't blind at all, he stood at the top of the gate stairs, one hand on the stone railing, bandaged face turned toward the commotion below. Barrett hesitated only a second, then pulled the lever. The gate swung open. Mira caught Rosie as she stumbled forward. The girl was burning up. 103, maybe 104. Dangerous territory for a child. "Rosie, honey, what happened? Where's your dad?" "The men took him. The ones with the scary eyes. They said he had to go away for a while, but I could stay here, and you'd take care of me. And everything would be okay if you just—" She dissolved into coughing. Wet. Productive. Pneumonia, Mira's medic brain supplied automatically. "Barrett," Lysander's voice cut through panic like a scalpel. "Bring them to the East Wing guest room. Mira, the child needs medical attention. We have a physician on retainer. I'll send for him." "I can handle it, my lord. I'm trained." "I know what you're trained for. But that child needs antibiotics and IV fluids and equipment you don't have access to. Let me help." There was something in his voice. Not pity, not even kindness exactly. More like recognition, as if he'd stood where Mira stood now, holding someone small and fragile while the world burned around them. She nodded. Couldn't speak past the fear closing her throat. The guest room was larger than Mira's entire apartment back in the city. Rosie looked even smaller in the massive bed, swallowed by silk sheets that probably cost more than a semester of college. Dr. Chen arrived within the hour, elderly, efficient, the kind of physician who'd probably treated everyone from CEOs to mob bosses, and kept his mouth shut about all of it. He examined Rosie with gentle, practiced hands, listened to her lungs, took her temperature, asked questions in a grandfather's voice that made even Mira relax slightly. "Pneumonia," he confirmed. "Bacterial. Possibly walking around with it for a week or more before it got bad enough to notice. She'll need antibiotics, rest, fluids, constant monitoring for the next 48 hours. He looked at Mira. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. I'll arrange for the medication to be delivered within the hour." He packed his bag with the careful precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "She's a fighter. She'll pull through." After he left, Mira sat in the chair beside Rosie's bed and held her niece's small, fevered hand. Rosie was asleep now, the kind of restless sleep that came with high fever. She'd wake up confused, ask for her father, and Mira would have to lie to her, the way she'd lied to dying soldiers who asked if they were going home. "She has your eyes," Mira startled. Lysander stood in the doorway. He'd changed clothes. Black suit. No bandages this time. Instead, a pair of dark glasses that concealed whatever lay beneath. "You can't see her eyes, my lord. I can hear the resemblance, the cadence of her breath, the rhythm of her heartbeat. She's blood of your blood. Even a blind man could sense that." He moved into the room, slow, careful, as if he really were navigating by sound alone. "They used her," Mira said quietly. "The Nightshade Syndicate. They took Nate and sent Rosie here sick and alone because they knew it would break me faster than any threat." "Yes." "That's monstrous." "Yes." Lysander reached the other chair, sat down with the careful grace of someone choosing the exact right spot. "But also effective. Fear for ourselves is manageable. Fear for children is paralyzing." He turned his dark glasses toward where Rosie lay sleeping. "When I was human, I had a daughter," he said, so quietly Mira almost missed it. "Eleanor. She would be 600 years old now if she'd lived. But she didn't. She died when she was 9. Pneumonia. Same as your niece. We didn't have antibiotics then. Didn't have IV fluids or oxygen or any of the miracles that make death optional instead of inevitable." His hands clenched on the armrests. "I held her while she drowned in her own lungs. Felt her heartbeat slow. Stop. And there was nothing I could do except promise her it wouldn't hurt. That she was going somewhere better. That her mother and I would see her again someday." Mira's throat closed. "My lord, I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was 600 years ago. The grief fades. But the memory?" He smiled, bitter. "That stays sharp forever." He stood, walked to the door, paused on the threshold. "Your niece will live, Mira, because we have science now instead of just prayer. But I want you to understand something." He turned, fixed his dark glasses on her with unnerving precision. "If anyone threatens that child again, blind or not, dying or not, I will tear them apart with my bare hands. She's under my protection now. Both of you are. Is that clear?" Mira stared at him, at this creature who'd survived plagues and wars and the death of his own daughter, who offered protection to a maid and her niece without asking for anything in return. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why do you care?" "Because your grandfather saved my life once by stepping into fire and dragging me out while I was too injured to move. I owe the Castellane family a debt, and unlike some people in this house, I pay my debts." He left before she could respond. Mira sat in the silence, holding Rosie's hand, and thought about honor and debts and the ways good men and monsters sometimes looked exactly the same. Wednesday morning, Gideon made his move. Mira was in the kitchen preparing Lysander's breakfast when the butler appeared. Immaculate, as always. Silver hair perfect, suit pressed, face arranged in an expression of false concern. "Miss Castellane, a word." Mira set down the blood packet she'd been warming. "I'm preparing Lord Ravencrest's meal." "This won't take long." Gideon gestured to the hallway, an invitation that wasn't really an invitation at all. They walked to his office, a room Mira had seen exactly once during her initial tour. Dark wood, heavy furniture, the kind of space designed to intimidate. Gideon closed the door, locked it. The click echoed like a gunshot. "I know about your brother," he said without preamble. Mira's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult us both." Gideon moved to his desk, pulled out a folder, spread photographs across the mahogany surface like cards in a poker game. Nate, tied to a chair, beaten, terrified. Nathaniel Castellane, $75,000 in debt to the Nightshade Syndicate. Debts his disabled veteran benefits can't begin to cover. Debts that will get him killed if they're not paid. Gideon's smile was viper cold. And his daughter, currently upstairs, recovering from pneumonia that was no accident at all. Mira's hands clenched into fists. "You infected her." "I did nothing. But yes, the Nightshade Syndicate has access to certain biological assets, and sick children make excellent leverage." "You're a monster." "I'm a pragmatist." Gideon sat on the edge of his desk, relaxed, confident. "Here's what's going to happen, Miss Castellane. Saturday night at midnight, you're going to unlock the servant entrance. You're going to disable the alarm system. And you're going to make sure Lord Ravencrest is in his chambers, unaware and unprotected." "And if I refuse?" "Then your brother dies. Slowly. Creatively. And your niece? Well, pneumonia can relapse, especially in children with compromised immune systems. And we'll make sure she gets a particularly aggressive strain next time." The room felt too small, too hot. Mira's army training screamed at her to attack, to disable this threat with extreme prejudice. But Gideon was vampire, old vampire. She'd be dead before her fist connected. "Why?" The word came out hoarse. "Why are you doing this? Lord Ravencrest trusts you." "Lord Ravencrest is a relic." Gideon's voice was ice. "He's held this territory for nearly 700 years, made treaties, played diplomat, pretended humans and vampires can coexist peacefully. But the world is changing, Miss Castellane, and those of us who see the future clearly understand that weakness is no longer sustainable." He stood, walked to the window, looked out at grounds that Lysander had cultivated for centuries. "There are vampires who believe we should have remained in the shadows. That exposure was a mistake. That the old ways of hunting and feeding and ruling through fear were superior to this modern pretense of civilization." He glanced back at Mira. "I happen to agree. And I'm not alone. Lord Cornelius Blackthorne shares my vision. And when Ravencrest Manor changes hands, that vision becomes reality. You're going to kill him. We're going to retire him, peacefully, with dignity. He'll sign over his territory, his holdings, his seat on the Vampire Council, and then he'll disappear to some quiet estate in Europe, where he can live out his remaining centuries in comfortable obscurity." Gideon's smile was poison. "Unless you force us to make it violent, in which case we'll stage a beautiful tragedy. Blind Lord attacks Maid. Maid defends herself. Lord bleeds out. Investigation finds him mentally incompetent for years. Territory transfers to next qualified administrator. Me." Mira's mind raced, looking for exits, options, anything that didn't end with everyone she cared about, dead or destroyed. "And my brother?" "Debt forgiven, daughter safe. You receive a generous severance package and a letter of recommendation. Everyone wins, except the blind fool who should have retired decades ago. He moved closer, dropped his voice to something almost kind. I'm not a monster, Miss Castellane. I'm offering you a way out. A way to save your family and walk away clean. All you have to do is unlock one door and look the other way for a few hours. That's not betrayal. That's survival. And in this world, survival is the highest form of intelligence. Mira looked at the photographs, at Nate's terrified face, at Rosie's pajamas with the dinosaurs that she loved so much. I need time to think. You have until Saturday midnight. Choose wisely. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She sat in her room, staring at the photographs Gideon had been so thoughtful as to provide. Physical reminders of what happened if she chose wrong. A knock at her door made her jump. Miss Castellane? Barrett's voice, gruff, careful. Lord Ravencrest requests your presence in the conservatory. The conservatory was Lysander's favorite room, all glass walls and ceiling, filled with orchids that bloomed only at night and plants that thrived in shadow. At 3 a.m, it should have been dark. Instead, candles burned in strategic places. Not enough to dispel the darkness, just enough to create islands of light in an ocean of shadow. Lysander stood at the far end, his back to her. He wore dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. No bandages, no glasses, just the bare truth of eyes that glowed faint violet in the candlelight. You can see, Mira said. Not a question, a statement of fact that had been building for days. Yes. He didn't turn around. I've never been blind. The bandages were theater. The glasses were props. All of it designed to make my enemies comfortable. To let them think I was vulnerable. Helpless. Easy prey. How long have you known I figured it out? The second day. You watched me navigate my chambers without hesitation. Your medical training recognized the signs of sight. But you didn't say anything. You kept my secret, even though you had no reason to trust me. He finally turned. Those violet eyes locked on her with intensity that made her breath catch. Why? Mira thought about that, about all the lies she'd witnessed in this house, all the casual cruelties, all the people who pretended loyalty while sharpening knives in the dark. Because you saved my grandfather. And because... She paused, searched for words. Because you're the only person in this entire manor who's been honest about who they are. Lysander's laugh was bitter. I've done nothing but lies since you arrived. No, you've performed. That's different. The person under the performance? The man who remembers his daughter? Who treats a sick child with more kindness than anyone else in this house? That person is real. Everything else is just survival. And you understand survival. I do. They stood in silence. The conservatory smelled like rain and growing things, like life in a house that too often smelled like death. Gideon came to me today, Mira said quietly. He knows about Nate, about Rosie. He wants me to unlock the servant entrance Saturday night. Let in whoever's coming to take you down. I know. You know? I've been listening to his conversations for 3 weeks. Barrett's been monitoring his communications for 6 months. We know about Blackthorn. We know about the coup. We know about the timeline. Lysander moved closer, each step deliberate. What we didn't know was whether you'd choose your family or mine when the moment came. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Mira felt something crack in her chest. This was all a test? Rosie getting sick? Nate being taken? All of it? No. The force in Lysander's voice made her flinch. Rosie's illness is real. Your brother's danger is real. Gideon's threats are real. What was a test was whether you'd come to me. Trust me. Let me help, instead of trying to handle it alone. He stopped close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. I have had 600 years to learn that loyalty can't be purchased or frightened into existence. It has to be chosen, again and again, even when the cost is unbearable. His hand came up, cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. You were supposed to be easy. Another pawn, another piece on the board, but you became something else entirely. What? Someone worth protecting. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Someone who deserves better than being caught between monsters playing games with lives. Mira's heart hammered. She should step back, maintain professional distance. Remember that he was her employer, and she was staff and nothing more. Instead, she leaned into the touch, let herself have this one moment of comfort before the world demanded impossible choices. What do I do? She whispered. What does your conscience tell you to do? My conscience is screaming in 6 different directions. Then listen to the loudest one. Lysander's eyes glowed brighter. But know this, Mira. Whatever you choose Saturday night, I will handle the aftermath. You don't carry this alone. Not anymore. Thunder rolled in the distance. Storm coming. The kind that turned the world to water and lightning and chaos. Tell me about Normandy, Mira said suddenly. Tell me how you saved my grandfather. Lysander smiled, surprised. Why? Because I need to know why this matters so much. Why you matter. So he told her about June 6th, 1944, about the beach red with blood and bodies, about Thomas Castellane, 22 years old, screaming for his mother with a bullet in his leg and 3 more in his abdomen, about Lysander, already centuries old, running through machine gun fire to drag a dying human to safety, because that's what honor demanded. I took 7 bullets getting him to the medics, Lysander said. Silver, from German munitions that someone had blessed or cursed or whatever superstition they believed would kill creatures like me. And I would have taken 70 more because that boy had a wife waiting at home, a future, a life that deserved protecting. He named my father Thomas Jr., Mira whispered. Always said he was named after a British officer who saved the platoon. Never said the officer was immortal. The immortal part tends to complicate the story. They stood together in the candlelight and storm shadow. 2 people who shouldn't have mattered to each other, who should have been nothing more than employer and employee, who had somehow become something words didn't quite cover. I'm going to lock the door, Mira said, made the decision in the moment she spoke it aloud. Saturday night, midnight. I'm going to take that key Gideon gave me, and I'm going to lock the servant entrance from the inside. Throw the key where no one can find it. And then I'm going to pray that you're strong enough to survive whatever comes next. Lysander's expression went very still. Your brother, my brother, is the most honorable man I know, and he would never forgive me if I saved his life by destroying someone else's. Tears burned in Mira's eyes. So I'm choosing to trust that you're strong enough, smart enough, powerful enough to protect all of us, because if I can't trust that, then nothing in this world makes sense anymore. Lysander pulled her against his chest. His arms came around her with the desperate strength of someone who'd waited centuries to find something worth holding on to. I won't let you down, he promised against her hair. I swear on my daughter's memory, on your grandfather's life, on every battle I've survived. You made the hardest choice. Now let me handle the rest." Thunder crashed. The storm broke. Rain hammered against glass walls hard enough to rattle the frame, and Mira held on to a vampire who saw everything and chose to protect her anyway. Saturday came too fast and too slow all at once. Mira moved through the day in a dream state, performed her duties with mechanical precision, fed Lysander his breakfast, read to him from books she didn't remember picking up, checked on Rosie, who was recovering well under the antibiotics and constant care. Normal duties for a normal day that would end with anything but normalcy. Gideon watched her constantly, waiting, ensuring she understood the stakes. Once he passed her in the hallway and pressed something into her hand, a key, cold, heavy. The servant entrance key that would decide who lived and who died. "Midnight," he whispered. "Don't be late." As darkness fell, Mira helped Lysander prepare for bed. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. She helped him into silk pajamas he didn't need help with, turned down sheets on a bed he could have managed alone. "Whatever happens tonight," Lysander said as she moved to leave, "I want you to know something." "My lord?" "You reminded me what it means to trust again. After centuries of suspicion and paranoia and waiting for the knife in the dark, you showed me that honor still exists." He smiled, sad, beautiful. "Thank you for that gift, Mira. It was worth more than you know." Mira's throat closed. "I'll see you in the morning, my lord." "Yes." His violet eyes glowed in the darkness. "You will." 11:45 p.m. Mira stood in the servants' hallway. The key felt like a weapon in her hand, heavy, cold, sharp enough to cut even though it had no edges. The entrance was solid oak, iron hinges, a lock that would take explosives to break if someone sealed it from the inside. She could hear footsteps above, the house settling, storm clouds gathering beyond the walls. 15 minutes until midnight. 15 minutes until she chose who lived and who died. Mira thought about Nate, about Rosie, about her mother's deathbed promise. She thought about Lysander, about honor and duty and debts paid across decades. She thought about her grandfather crawling through blood and sand on Normandy Beach while a vampire carried him to safety. She inserted the key into the lock, turned it. The deadbolt slid home with a decisive click. Not unlocked, locked. Mira turned the key again, twice, 3 times. Maximum security. No one was getting through this door without power tools and time. Then she ripped the key from the lock and dropped it down the ventilation grate. It clattered against metal on the way down, disappeared into the darkness where no one would ever find it. "I'm sorry, Nate," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. But I can't betray him. I can't." She slid down the door, curled into a ball, wept into her hands with the desperate grief of someone who'd just condemned their own family to death. Footsteps approached, heavy, multiple pairs. Mira looked up through tears. Lysander stood at the end of the hallway. No bandages, no glasses, violet eyes blazing like phosphorus fire. He wore black combat gear that looked like it came from a military armory. Behind him, Barrett and 6 shadow guards, all armed, all ready. "You locked it," Lysander said, softly, wonderingly. Mira nodded, couldn't speak past the tears. Lysander crossed the distance in seconds, pulled her to her feet, held her face between his hands. You chose me over your brother. I chose honor over fear. There's a difference. No. He kissed her forehead, gentle, reverent. There really isn't. Barrett? The captain stepped forward, handed Lysander a phone. On the screen was a live video feed. Nate, sitting in the back of a luxury car, unbound, unhurt, eating a sandwich, looking confused but healthy. We extracted him 3 hours ago, Lysander explained. Shadow team hit the Nightshade warehouse. 16 hostiles neutralized. Your brother was the only hostage. He's safe, Mira. He's been safe since Tuesday. Mira stared at the screen, at her brother, alive, whole. You knew I'd lock the door. I hoped. I didn't know. Lysander's smile was fierce, proud. But I wasn't going to let you pay the price for loyalty. That's not how this works. Somewhere in the house, glass shattered. Voices shouted. The assault had begun. Lysander's expression went cold. Lethal. Stay here, he commanded. Barrett, guard her. The rest of you, with me. Wait! Mira grabbed his arm. What about Rosie? Already secured, hidden room, 2 guards. No one gets near her. Lysander turned. Now I'm going to show my old friend Gideon what happens when you mistake a blind king for easy prey. He moved down the hallway like death in human form. And the battle for Ravencrest Manor began. The library of Ravencrest Manor had witnessed 600 years of history. Treaties signed, declarations made, judgments rendered that shaped the vampire world for generations. Tonight, it would witness something simpler. Blood. Mira huddled in the servants' corridor with Barrett standing guard, listening to the symphony of violence echoing through the manor. Glass breaking, doors splintering, gunfire, the wet sounds of bodies hitting marble, and underneath it all, screams that cut off too quickly. How many? She asked. Barrett's expression was stone. 15 Nightshade operatives, Gideon, and whoever Gideon brought as backup. He checked his weapon, something that looked like it belonged in a war zone rather than a household. My lord can handle 15. The backup concerns me. Because you don't know who it is? Because we know exactly who it is. And if Lord Blackthorn is here personally, this isn't a coup. It's an execution. A crash from the main hall. Closer now. The battle was moving their direction. Barrett moved to intercept. Stay here. Don't leave this hallway. Don't open any doors. If someone tries to breach, run. Don't fight. Just run. I'm a combat medic. I don't run. Tonight you do. That's an order from... The wall exploded. Not metaphorically. The actual stone wall shattered inward in a spray of debris and mortar. A body flew through the opening, crashed into the opposite wall, hard enough to leave a crater, slid to the floor in a heap of broken limbs and blood. One of the shadow guards, dead before he hit the ground. Through the hole stepped a creature that made Mira's hindbrain scream warnings her conscious mind struggled to process. Garrett, the Nightshade lieutenant. 7 feet of muscle and teeth and yellow eyes that glowed like a wolf's in headlights. Not vampire. Something else. Something older and meaner and built for killing. He grinned, saw Mira. Recognition flashed across his face. The Maid, he rumbled, voice like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. Boss wants you alive, said your leverage. Barrett opened fire, 3 round bursts, center mass, professional, precise. Garrett took the bullets and laughed. The rounds punched through his chest, exited his back, left holes that sealed themselves in seconds. "Silver doesn't work on shifters, old man." Garrett backhanded Barrett across the corridor. The captain hit the wall, went down, didn't get up. Mira ran, not away, toward. Grabbed the nearest object, a brass candlestick taller than she was, and swung it like a Louisville slugger at Garrett's knee. The joint buckled, sideways, wrong direction, ligaments snapping audibly. Garrett howled, dropped, grabbed her ankle. Mira went down hard, hit marble, felt ribs crack. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just felt Garrett's hand like a vice around her leg, dragging her toward teeth that could take her head off in one bite. Then he wasn't there anymore. Lysander appeared from shadow like materialization. One moment, empty corridor. Next moment, solid presence between Mira and death. He grabbed Garrett by the throat, lifted the 300-pound shifter one-handed, slammed him into the wall, hard enough to crack stone. "She is mine." Each word punctuated with another impact. Garrett tried to fight back. Claws raked Lysander's chest, drew blood. Lysander didn't even blink. He drove his fist through Garrett's sternum, ripped out something vital, dropped the body like garbage. Then he turned to Mira, blood on his face, his clothes, his hands, violet eyes blazing with something between fury and fear. "Are you hurt?" "Ribs, maybe broken. I can breathe, so probably not punctured lung." He scooped her up, cradled her against his chest, started moving. "Barrett?" Mira asked. "Unconscious, alive. My people will secure him." Lysander navigated the chaos without breaking stride. "I'm getting you somewhere safe." "What about Gideon?" "Gideon," Lysander's smile was all teeth and violence, "is about to learn why vampires who survive 700 years don't do it by being weak." The library. Of course it was the library. Lysander kicked the doors open, carried Mira inside, set her down in his reading chair with the gentleness of someone handling porcelain. "Stay," he commanded. "Whatever happens, stay in this chair. Don't try to help. Don't try to run. Just stay." "Lysander, please." The word cost him something. "Let me protect you. Let me do this one thing right." Before Mira could respond, the library filled with people who wanted them dead. They came through the door, the windows, the walls. 15 Nightshade operatives who'd been promised territory and power if they could take down one blind vampire lord. They weren't prepared for what they found. Lysander stood in the center of the library, surrounded, outnumbered, covered in blood that mostly wasn't his. He reached up, pulled off his shirt, dropped it on the floor. His torso was a road map of scars, bullet wounds, blade wounds, burns. 600 years of violence recorded on pale skin that should have healed cleanly, but hadn't, because silver and magic and curses left marks that never fully faded. "I am Lysander Ravencrest," he said, voice carrying to every corner. "I fought at Waterloo, survived Verdun, walked out of Normandy with 37 men who should have died. I have killed kings and toppled empires, and outlived everyone who ever thought I was easy prey." He smiled, cold, lethal. "Did you really think bandages made me helpless?" The first operative fired. Center mass. Silver bullet. The kind that should have put Lysander down. Lysander moved. Not fast. Faster than fast. Reality-bending speed that made him a blur between heartbeats. He caught the bullet, plucked it out of the air like picking fruit, held it up for everyone to see, then he threw it back. The bullet punched through the shooter's eye, exited the back of his skull. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Next! They came at him all at once. Tactical mistake. Desperation move. The kind of attack that works in movies but fails in reality because humans, even enhanced humans, can't coordinate that level of chaos effectively. Lysander destroyed them. He moved through the assault like a dancer through choreography. Every movement economical, precise, lethal. Broke necks, snapped spines, ripped out throats with bare hands. A machete swing at his head. He ducked, grabbed the wielder's wrist, twisted until bones splintered, took the machete, used it to disarm 3 more attackers in a sequence that looked like art. Mira watched from the chair, medical training, cataloging injuries, even while her heart hammered terror and awe in equal measure. Fractured skull, severed carotid, compound fracture, exsanguination. 90 seconds, 15 men, Lysander barely breathing hard. He stood in the center of carnage, blood pooling around his feet, expression empty except for eyes that burned like phosphorus. "Where," he said quietly, "is Gideon?" "Here." The voice came from the doorway. Gideon stood there, immaculate despite the chaos, not a hair out of place, suit pressed, face arranged in an expression of mild disappointment. "That was sloppy, my lord. I expected better from professionals." "They were cannon fodder." Lysander dropped the machete. "You knew I'd kill them. You sent them anyway. Why?" "Distraction," Gideon smiled. "While you were playing with pawns, the real player arrived." The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost spread across the library windows. The candles flickered, died, plunged the room into darkness, broken only by violet and silver light from vampire eyes. A figure materialized in the doorway behind Gideon. He was tall, thin, dressed in a suit that looked antebellum South. His skin was the color of old parchment. His eyes were silver coins, and when he smiled, Mira saw teeth that had torn through centuries of victims. "Hello, Lysander." The voice was magnolia and arsenic, old money and older evil. "It's been, what, 180 years since we last spoke?" Lysander went absolutely still. The kind of stillness that prey animals recognize as predator attention. "Cornelius Blackthorne." Each syllable was ice. "You're not welcome in my territory." "Your territory?" Blackthorne laughed, stepped into the library. Frost followed him. "I rather think this will be my territory by sunrise. Gideon has been most helpful in arranging the transition. All you need to do is sign a few documents, transfer some holdings, and then you can retire to whatever European villa suits your declining years. And if I refuse, then we kill everyone you care about." Blackthorne's eyes found Mira, starting with the maid who locked the door when she should have opened it. Admirable loyalty, truly, but loyalty without wisdom is just martyrdom waiting to happen. Mira's hands clenched on the chair arms. Every instinct screamed to run, fight, do something. But Barrett's words echoed, "Don't fight, just run." Except she couldn't run. Broken ribs made breathing agony. Standing would be impossible. She was trapped in a chair while monsters discussed her death like ordering dinner. "Leave her out of this," Lysander said. "This is between us." "Oh, Lysander, it's always been between us." Blackthorne circled the library, casual, confident. "Do you remember 1840? Charleston? You came to my plantation, told me that slavery was ending, that the old ways were dying, that vampires needed to evolve or face extinction. I remember. You burned my estate to the ground, freed my workers, cost me 3 million in today's currency. Blackthorn's smile was razor wire. But I'm a patient man. I waited, watched, and when you had something precious, I took it. Lysander's expression shattered. Eleanor. Eleanor. Blackthorn savored the name. 9 years old, pneumonia. So tragic. Except pneumonia doesn't usually present with silver dust in the lungs. But by the time you figured that out, she was already gone. And you couldn't prove anything. Couldn't touch me without starting a war the council would crush you for. The air in the library turned to murder. Lysander's eyes went from violet to pure white. Power rolled off him in waves that made Mira's teeth ache. You killed my daughter. I did. Blackthorn was enjoying this. And then I waited, watched you grieve, watched you harden, watched you build your precious territories and make your precious treaties and pretend the modern world meant vampires couldn't be monsters anymore. He stopped circling, faced Lysander directly. But then you made a mistake. You saved that platoon on Normandy Beach. 37 men, including one Thomas Castellane. And I thought, how interesting. Lysander's capable of caring again. So I planted seeds, waited for them to grow. And decades later, here we are. Thomas's granddaughter sitting in your library, working as your maid, making you feel things you haven't felt in a century. Blackthorn's grin was razors. So I'm going to kill her, right here, right now, while you watch. And then you're going to sign my documents, because you'll be too broken to fight anymore. He moved toward Mira. Lysander moved faster. They collided in the center of the library with force that shattered furniture. Lysander's fist connected with Blackthorn's face. The older vampire staggered, recovered, retaliated with a knee to Lysander's ribs that lifted him off the ground. They fought like gods, like demons, like creatures who'd survived centuries by being the most dangerous thing in any room. Blackthorn was older, stronger, more experienced, but Lysander was furious. He drove Blackthorn through a bookshelf, grabbed a broken timber, stake, drove it toward Blackthorn's heart. Blackthorn caught his wrist, twisted, the stake clattered away. You were always sentimental, Lysander. That's why you'll lose. You care about cattle. I use them. He threw Lysander across the room, into the wall. Marble cracked. Lysander slid down, left a blood smear. Blackthorn turned back to Mira. Now, where were we? Mira tried to stand. Ribs screamed. Vision grayed. She had no weapons, no strength. Nothing except 12 years of military training that taught her one critical lesson. When you can't win, change the game. He's lying, she gasped. Blackthorn paused. Excuse me? About the platoon, about my grandfather. Mira forced words through pain. Thomas Castellane wasn't saved by accident. Lysander targeted that unit specifically, because they were holding intelligence on German positions. He saved them to get intel, not because he cared. Blackthorn frowned, confused by the sudden shift. Lysander, climbing to his feet across the room, went absolutely still. Is that true? Blackthorn asked. Were you using them? Lysander started. Of course it's true, Mira interrupted. You think a 700-year-old vampire risks his life for strangers out of kindness? Please. He's been using humans for centuries. That's what makes him so dangerous. He makes us think we matter, when we're just tools. She met Lysander's eyes, saw his confusion, his hurt, and underneath, a flash of understanding. She was giving him ammunition, strategic intel, the only way she could help. "So if you're going to kill me," Mira continued, addressing Blackthorn, "at least be honest about what I am. A pawn, a tool, nothing special. Killing me won't break him because I don't matter enough." Blackthorn studied her, then laughed. "Clever girl. Trying to make yourself worthless so I'll lose interest. But I've seen the way he looks at you, heard the way he says your name. You matter, little human, whether you want to admit it or not." He reached for her throat. Gideon, forgotten in the corner, spoke up. "My Lord Blackthorn, the documents are ready. Perhaps we should focus on the transfer before—" "Shut up, Gideon." Blackthorn didn't take his eyes off Mira. "Business can wait 5 minutes while I make a point." That's when Mira made her move. She'd been a combat medic for 12 years. Knew human anatomy, knew pressure points, knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum pain with minimum strength. Vampire anatomy was similar enough. She grabbed the broken chair arm, drove it up into Blackthorn's solar plexus, angled wrong for his heart, but right for his diaphragm. The wood punched through skin, muscle, scraped bone. Blackthorn roared, backhanded her across the face. Mira hit the floor, tasted blood, couldn't breathe. Ribs definitely broken now. Maybe punctured lung. Definition bad. But she'd bought 3 seconds. Lysander used them. He crossed the library in a blur, hit Blackthorn from behind, wrapped an arm around the older vampire's throat, squeezed. "You want to know the truth about Normandy?" Lysander snarled into Blackthorn's ear. "I did target that unit, not for intelligence, because I overheard one of them talking about his wife, about the baby daughter he'd never met, about how he promised he'd come home." He tightened his grip. "I was 800 years old. I'd forgotten what promises meant, what hope looked like. But that boy in the mud and blood and death, he remembered. So I saved him, saved all of them, because if he could hold on to hope in that hell, maybe I could too." Blackthorn clawed at Lysander's arm, drew blood. Lysander didn't let go. "You killed my daughter because I freed your slaves, because I chose humanity over heritage, and you thought that would break me, make me like you." Lysander's eyes burned white hot. But Eleanor's last words were, "Help people, Papa, even when it's hard. 9 years old and wiser than you'll ever be." He wrenched sideways. Blackthorn's neck snapped. Not fatal, not for a vampire that old, but disorienting, painful. Lysander threw him across the library, grabbed the fallen machete, stalked forward with murder in every line of his body. "Wait!" Gideon, panicking now. "My Lord Ravencrest, I can explain. I was coerced. Blackthorn threatened my family. I never wanted—" "Liar." Lysander didn't even look at him. "You embezzled for 15 years before Blackthorn approached you. You betrayed me for money long before ideology entered the picture." "Please, I'll testify against Blackthorn, give you everything, names, dates, accounts." "I already have all of that." Lysander stopped in front of Gideon. "What I don't have is patience for traitors who grovel when the trap closes." He grabbed Gideon by the throat, lifted. The butler's feet kicked air. "You served me for 120 years. I trusted you with my household, my finances, my life. And you repaid that trust by trying to murder me in my sleep. I wasn't going to murder you, just retire you. You were supposed to live." "Was Eleanor supposed to live?" Lysander's voice dropped to something barely audible. Was Thomas Castellane supposed to live when you orchestrated that German ambush? Were the 37 men in that platoon supposed to live when you sold their position to the enemy? Gideon's eyes went wide. Denial. Shock. Guilty confirmation. Yes, Lysander said softly. I know about that too. Blackthorn told me while he thought I was unconscious. How you fed German intelligence about Allied movements. How you wanted Thomas dead so his granddaughter would have no family ties, would be more vulnerable to recruitment. He squeezed. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed 60 years of Castellane family history, tried to erase a bloodline because it was inconvenient. Lysander, please. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Gideon went limp. Lysander dropped the body, turned back to Blackthorn, who'd recovered enough to stand. Just us now, Lysander said. The way it should have been 200 years ago. Blackthorn spat blood. You can't win, boy. I'm 300 years older, stronger, faster. But I have something you don't. Lysander smiled, gestured to Mira, struggling to breathe on the floor. Something worth fighting for. They clashed again, faster now, desperate. Two immortals trying to kill what couldn't be killed. Mira watched through pain-blurred vision, tried to think, tried to help. Medical training. What did she have? What could she use? Her emergency kit, still strapped to her belt. She'd carried it every day since the army taught her that preparedness meant the difference between life and death. She fumbled it open, hands shaking, found what she needed. Epinephrine, adrenaline, the kind they used for anaphylactic shock, also the kind that supercharged a vampire's already superhuman system for approximately 90 seconds before the crash. Lysander! She threw the auto-injector across the library. He caught it without looking, understood immediately, jammed it into his thigh, depressed the plunger. The effect was instantaneous. Lysander's eyes went from white to blazing nova. His muscles expanded. Veins stood out like cables under skin. He moved like lightning given form. He grabbed Blackthorn's arm, twisted, dislocated the shoulder, broke the elbow, shattered the wrist. Blackthorn screamed. Lysander grabbed his other arm, repeated the process. This is for Eleanor. Then he grabbed Blackthorn's head in both hands, looked into silver coin eyes that finally showed fear. And this is for every person you destroyed, because you couldn't accept that the world moved on without you. He twisted. The sound was like a tree splitting in a storm. Blackthorn's head came off. Didn't disintegrate. Didn't explode. Just separated from the body in a gush of blood that sprayed across marble and Persian rugs and 600 years of accumulated history. The body hit the floor, twitched, went still. Lysander stood over it, breathing hard, the adrenaline high already fading. He swayed, caught himself on a bookshelf. Mira, her name slurred. Crash coming fast. Are you... I'm okay. Come here. Sit down before you collapse. He stumbled toward her, dropped to his knees beside the chair. She touched his face. Cold. Colder than usual. The adrenaline had burned through his resources faster than blood could replenish. You need to feed, Mira said. Later. Are you hurt? Broken ribs, maybe punctured lung. Definitely concussion from where Blackthorn hit me. I'll get a doctor. I am a doctor. Well, medic. Close enough. She managed a weak smile. We're both alive. That's what matters. They sat in the wreckage, surrounded by bodies, blood, the ruins of everything Blackthorn had tried to take, and held on to each other while the manor settled into silence around them. 90 minutes later, the library doors opened. Barrett limped in, face swollen where Garrett had hit him, but alive, functional. Behind him, a delegation. Council members. The official vampire government. 6 of them. Old. Powerful. The kind of vampires who decided territorial disputes and ratified treaties. They stopped, surveyed the carnage. The lead counselor, a woman with white hair and black eyes, stepped forward. "Lord Ravencrest? We received reports of an attempted coup, multiple casualties, allegations of conspiracy." Her gaze swept the room, landed on Blackthorn's severed head. "I see the reports were accurate." Lysander stood, steadied himself on the chair back. "Councillor Ashwood, Lord Blackthorn orchestrated an assassination attempt, corrupted my staff, threatened civilian humans under my protection. I responded with appropriate force." "Appropriate?" Another councillor, male, sneering. "You've created a massacre." "I've defended my territory, as is my right under council law." "And the human?" The male councillor pointed at Mira. "She's been treated by our physician, given blood transfusions, housed in quarters above her station. Are we to believe this is standard employment practice?" Mira's jaw tightened. She tried to stand. Lysander's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. "Miss Castellan," Lysander said clearly, "is under my personal protection. She exposed the conspiracy that nearly destroyed this territory. She chose loyalty over family, when doing so could have cost her everything. And she saved my life tonight with quick thinking under fire." He paused. Let that sink in. "She is not standard employment. She is irreplaceable. And any insult to her is an insult to House Ravencrest. Is that clear?" The council members exchanged glances, uncomfortable, uncertain how to proceed. Then Lysander did something no one expected. He knelt. Not the casual knee drop of someone tying a shoe. The formal, public, courtly kneel of a vassal before a lord, or a lord before a queen. He knelt in front of Mira's chair, in front of 6 council members, in front of Barrett and the gathered household staff who'd crept in to witness the aftermath. Took her hand. "Miriam Castellane," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have proven your honor beyond question, your courage beyond doubt, your loyalty beyond price. I ask you now, in front of witnesses, to accept the position of Lady of Ravencrest Manor, not as servant, not as staff, as equal partner in governance of this territory." Mira stared at him, at this 700-year-old vampire kneeling in blood and rubble, and declaring her his equal in front of the most powerful vampires in North America. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I'm human." "So was my wife, 300 years ago. The council approved that marriage. They'll approve this one." His violet eyes held hers. "If you say yes." "Lysander, She glanced at the council, at the staff, at Barrett's carefully neutral expression. "I'm a maid. I make minimum wage. I have broken ribs and a brother with PTSD and a niece who needs stability." "You're a veteran, a healer, a woman who chose principle over survival when survival was the easier choice." He squeezed her hand. "Say yes, Mira. Help me build something better than what Blackthorn wanted. Help me prove that honor and humanity can coexist." Mira looked at him. Really looked. Saw the scars, the centuries of pain, the hope in his eyes that he was trying so hard to hide. Thought about her grandfather crawling through Normandy mud while this man carried him to safety. Thought about Eleanor, 9 years old. Help people, Papa. Thought about Nate, about Rosie, about building a world where desperate people didn't have to choose between family and conscience. "Yes," she said, "but on one condition." "Name it." "No more lies. No more tests. No more pretending. If we do this, we do it as partners, real partners, equals who trust each other." Lysander's smile was sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "No more lies," he promised, "starting now." He stood, helped her to her feet, turned to the council. "Councillor Ashwood, I formally petition for recognition of Miriam Castelaine as Lady Ravencrest. All rights and privileges, all responsibilities and authorities, subject to standard vetting and approval process." Ashwood studied them both, human and vampire, maid and lord, the kind of partnership that shouldn't work but somehow did. "The council will convene," she said finally. "Expect our decision within 30 days. In the meantime, this territory remains under your governance, Lord Ravencrest. Try not to create any more massacres before we return." They left, formal, dignified, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a complete upending of vampire social hierarchy. When the doors closed, Mira turned to Lysander. "Did that really just happen?" "I believe so, though I'm somewhat concussed from the adrenaline crash, so I could be hallucinating." "You knelt in front of the council." "I did." "No vampire does that." "I just did." He touched her face, gentle despite the violence still coating his hands. "You locked the door, Mira, when everything in your life told you to open it. You chose me over your brother. That deserves more than gratitude. It deserves acknowledgement. You saved Nate anyway." "Of course I did. I'm not a monster." He smiled. "Well, I am. But I'm trying to be a better class of monster." Mira laughed. It hurt her ribs, but she couldn't stop. Hysteria and relief and exhaustion, all crashing together. Lysander caught her when her knees gave out, lifted her carefully, started toward the door. "Where are we going?" "Medical wing. You need x-rays and proper treatment, then bed rest. Then we're going to have a very long discussion about what being Lady Ravencrest actually entails." "And my brother?" "Already en route. Should arrive by morning, along with your niece, who I believe is currently teaching my security team how to play Go Fish." He carried her through the manor, past the damage, the bodies, the evidence of a coup that had failed, because one woman chose honor over expedience. 1 year later, the gardens of Ravencrest Manor bloomed with roses that shouldn't survive this far north. But Mira had researched, consulted with botanists, applied her military logistics training to horticulture. If she was going to be lady of this territory, the gardens would damn well bloom. She walked through them now, dawn approaching, the sky that soft gray that came before sunrise. Behind her, the manor stood solid, renovated, cleaned, staffed with people who'd been thoroughly vetted and actually gave a damn about doing their jobs correctly. Barrett approached, limping less these days. "My lady, the council delegation has arrived." "Already? They're not due until noon." "They wanted to surprise you. See the territory functioning without preparation time." "Then they're about to be disappointed," Mira smiled. "We're always prepared." They walked together toward the main hall. Over the past year, Barrett had become friend as much as security. One of the few people who remembered when she was just Mira the Maid instead of Lady Castellan. The main hall had been completely rebuilt. The bloodstains were gone, the shattered furniture replaced. But Lysander had insisted on keeping one thing, the old bandages, framed, mounted on the wall, next to a display case containing Mira's medical kit. 2 artifacts, 2 symbols, 2 people who'd survived by pretending to be something they weren't until they learned to be exactly who they were. Councillor Ashwood stood examining them. Unusual decor, Lady Castellan. Reminders, Councillor. Mira joined her. That appearances deceive, that honor costs, that loyalty matters more than hierarchy. And has that philosophy served you well this year? Judge for yourself. Mira gestured to the windows. Beyond them, the territory thrived. Crime down 40%, vampire-human cooperation at all-time high. Economic growth steady. 0 coups attempted. 0 successful coups, Ashwood corrected dryly. We've intercepted 3 plots, all shut down before they gain traction. Because we pay attention. Lysander's voice. He entered from the east wing, immaculate in a charcoal suit. No bandages, no pretense, just himself. And because we built something worth protecting. He stopped beside Mira, didn't touch her, didn't need to. Their partnership was visible in posture, in the way they moved together, in the way he deferred to her knowledge and she deferred to his experience. Equals. Ashwood watched them, calculating, assessing. The council has made a decision regarding your petition. Mira's hand found Lysander's, squeezed. We've decided, Ashwood continued, that human-vampire partnerships are no longer prohibited, provided both parties meet standards of competence and character, and provided the human undergoes training in vampire law, culture, and governance. She pulled out a document, formal, sealed, official. Miriam Castellan, you are hereby recognized as Lady Ravencrest. All rights, all privileges, all responsibilities. Congratulations. Try not to make us regret this. She left the document on the table, departed with her delegation, left Mira and Lysander standing in the hall that had witnessed so much death and now witnessed something like hope. Well, Lysander said, that went better than expected. Did you doubt? Always. 700 years teaches you that nothing good lasts forever. He turned to her, violet eyes, serious. But it also teaches you that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. From outside, voices. Nate and Rosie arriving for their weekly visit. Nate walked better now. New prosthetic, physical therapy, purpose. He'd taken a position as head of security for a local veterans shelter, used his experience to help others. Rosie ran ahead, burst into the hall, saw Mira and launched herself forward. Aunt Mira, did you hear? Dad got promoted, and I got an A on my science project. And Uncle Lysander, I learned a new song. Want to hear it? Lysander smiled, genuine, warm. The expression of someone who'd lost a daughter centuries ago and found a piece of that joy again, in a niece by marriage. I would love to hear it, little one. Mira watched them, her family, blood and chosen, human and vampire, broken and healing and moving forward together. She thought about her grandfather, about promises made on deathbeds and battlefields, about the price of honor and the value of loyalty. Thought about a night 1 year ago when she'd held a key that could have saved her brother and chose to lock a door instead. Best decision she'd ever made. Epilogue. In Lysander's private study, Two objects sat on the mantel where centuries of Ravencrest family treasures had been displayed. A set of white bandages, blood-stained, torn, the lie that revealed truth. A combat medic's field kit, battered, well used, the tools that saved a life and changed a world. Between them, a photograph, Lysander and Mira on their formal bonding day, her in green silk that matched her eyes, him in black that matched his soul, until she'd added color to it. And behind them, visible in the photograph, a banner. Two words in Latin, honor vincit. Honor conquers. Mira stood in the study now, 1 year after the photograph, reviewing territory reports, standard work for a lady of the manor. Lysander entered, crossed to her, wrapped arms around her waist from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder. "Come to bed," he murmured. "The reports can wait." "I'm almost done." "You're always almost done. That's what I love about you. Your inability to leave work unfinished." "I learned from the best." She turned in his arms. "From a vampire who pretended to be blind for 8 months just to catch traitors. That's dedication. That's paranoia. Same thing in our world." They stood together in comfortable silence. No words needed. Just presence. Partnership. The thing they'd built from lies and blood and impossible choices. "Do you ever regret it?" Lysander asked quietly. "Choosing me over Nate?" Mira thought about that. Really thought. "I chose honor over fear. Principle over convenience. The right thing over the easy thing." She cupped his face. Cold skin that she'd learned to love. "And I got you, Nate, Rosie, and a purpose all in one package. So no, I don't regret it. I'd make the same choice tomorrow." "Even knowing what it cost?" "Especially knowing what it cost. Because, Lysander, here's what I learned that night." She pulled him closer. "Honor isn't free. Loyalty isn't easy. And love, real love, the kind that lasts centuries, starts when you choose someone else's life over your own comfort." She kissed him. Soft, sweet. The kind of kiss that promised tomorrow and next year, and however long forever actually lasted. "Now," she whispered against his lips, "about those reports." "Forget the reports." He lifted her, carried her toward their chambers. "I'm 700 years old. I'm finally learning that some things are more important than work." "Such as?" "Such as making sure my wife knows exactly how much I appreciate that she locked a door when everyone in her life told her to open it." Behind them, the study fell into darkness, but the objects on the mantel remained visible, lit by moonlight through windows that no longer needed to be curtained. The bandages, the medical kit, the photograph. Reminders that sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one who hunts in the open. It's the one who teaches you to trust again. And sometimes the bravest hero isn't the one who fights battles. It's the one who locks the door and prays she chose right. Because in the end, honor isn't measured in victories or defeats. It's measured in the choices we make when everything we love hangs in the balance. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you choose honor over fear, you don't just survive, you win.